Hello everybody, welcome to the Advanced Malware Analysis course. Today we are going to begin with exploring malware functionalities. This will be our start point because it's very key to understand the nature of intent of various forms of malware so that when analyzing them, it becomes easier to perform more objective analysis. So in this section, we're going to cover various forms of malware that are most common in this day and age and have been used in the most recent attacks. So the first one is backdoors. Then we are going to also have a look at keyloggers and information stealers. We're going to have a look at downloaders, which are the main entry point for any form of malware. And then we will have a look at ransomware, which has been a key thing in the recent past, as well as rootkits. An understanding of this will enable us to at least be better prepared when it comes to malware analysis. So diving into this, we're going to start with backdoors. In this particular video, we will have a look at what backdoors are, the various types of backdoors that are available, and what they target in various systems. And then we'll have a look at some examples just to put everything into context and glue the pieces together. So what are backdoors? So these are anything that will allow someone remote or at times local access, but this is rare in cases where you have an attacker with a very wide attack surface. So most of the instances will be remote access. So any form of software that allows an attacker to maintain this form of access typically be called a backdoor. So it may be to newly gain access or to maintain access after a given attack. The means are non-conventional in the sense that it's not authorized or to your knowledge. When it is to your knowledge, it can't be considered necessarily a backdoor, or it may be considered a mild form of the backdoor. So there are two types of backdoors. The first ones are hardware-based backdoors, which are implemented in most cases using code inside hardware. This may reside in firmware, chips, and the likes. The second instance is the software-based backdoors. These are the most common and are what is seen in most software, especially if it's pirated. You would find some form of backdoor on it. So this particular one usually affects the softer layers, or rather, it's the easier one to deploy because it gives access to a target from an operating system or a particular application perspective. When we get to the examples, you will see how this all glues together. So, what do backdoors target? Backdoors target a number of things. If we start with hardware-based backdoors, they will target items like industrial control systems. This will enable them to have control of things like smart houses or power lines or power plants rather. And then the other thing is network devices, which will allow access to them at any given point in time. We also have the access control systems. So for instance, a backdoor may seek to bypass things like authentication tokens once they're set up. We also have the surveillance systems and the general communication infrastructure. As you can see, this may prove to be a huge problem in the sense of they are backdoors which are implemented during design. Consider this being implemented during manufacturing, for instance. This may make things like hacking of cars a reality, which is seen to date. So they are usually very hard to remove from any system because anti-malware solutions may find it hard to detect them. And then also they can circumvent some security controls. For instance, on a PC, they may circumvent things like disk encryption. As you can see, that makes it very, very hard to deal with hardware-based backdoors. When it comes to the software ones, we will be dealing with the software-based backdoors. These ones seek to exfiltrate information in general. So they may seek to take sensitive documents, have access to peripheral devices like cameras. For instance, if your webcam all of a sudden comes on and someone is monitoring you, takes a screenshot, this can be done by a software-based backdoor. Computer systems in general can be compromised using software-based backdoors, and then also user credentials and financial information like credit card details and the likes are usually the main targets of software-based backdoors. Now, this makes it a very, very dangerous thing because, above all, information in this case, and this makes it a very viable attack surface because it does breach the triad of security where we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Because if you consider these targets and you consider what is being taken from them, confidentiality is breached in the sense of information is lost by a user to an attacker. Integrity is also lost because an attacker has access, which means if they chose to modify any of this information, they would have done so. Additionally, availability may be a problem because with that level of access that attackers seek using backdoors, they may be able to shut down systems or modify them in such a way that as much as they are available, they do not work as desired, which means that they will be a disservice to the consumers of these services. So let's put this into context. We've had a number of instances where we have backdoors within systems. We will look at instances where there are each of them. So let's start with a hardware-based backdoor. Some of you may be familiar with this and some may not. The DSL backdoor, which was put in some network devices. And this was made by hardware from a company known as Sarcom in 2013, where on one of the ports used to access, this is port 32,764, they left an open backdoor, which allowed arbitrary access, administrative access that is, to their network devices. A number of Cisco devices also used this software, and Cisco being as common as it is, it was found to be vulnerable. Now, when they were asked to fix this in 2014, they did a partial fix. So all that was fixed was they changed the method in which the backdoor loads. So you just have to do a certain form of port knocking in order for the backdoor to activate rather than make it fully arbitrary. So once you do that, you still have arbitrary access, but you need to have known how to do the port knock. So there is still yet to be a proper fix for those particular devices that use this hardware from Sarcom. Next, we're looking at a software-based backdoor from a very common FTP client software. This is called Pro FTPD. Now, it's both used as a client and server software. It's used for FTP transactions between machines. So back in 2010, some attackers did find the source code for this software and managed to modify it. Now, the modification was quite sophisticated in that it allowed an attacker to gain root or administrative access to any system implementing ProFTPD as a server. So you install the software regularly, it does work. However, in the background, it does open up an arbitrary command shell for attackers. Now, this was done by a trigger. They did a custom trigger basically. So when you request help acid beaches, sorry for the profanity in the word, it did spawn this shell. Now, when that is done, it gives them administrative access, other things that even the FTP software initially may have failed to access. And then we cannot fail to discuss the most controversial group, which is the NSA, and one of their Tau backdoors. So what is a Tau backdoor? This is basically a tailored access operation backdoor. Now, NSA has been known intrinsically for being responsible in a number of breaches to privacy, and this was one of them. And they created a hardware-based backdoor which was delivered overseas and put in various device firmwares, and then these device firmwares were sent to various people. Now, the main aim of this was to have access to systems. Some of the devices that were affected were like PC peripherals, like hard drives, and even other PC components like chips. This was a very huge breach, and quite a number of machines were affected over that given period. The main aim of this was done to plant surveillance software. Lastly, we use content management systems online nowadays, and this include things like Joomla, WordPress, Drupal, and the likes. So most people do not buy some of the functionality that they require. They prefer to use pirated copies. Attackers, knowing this, have offered this freely. Now, when they do offer this, they do encode simple backdoors that give them access to these systems. So you do go take, for instance, a WordPress plugin that should have been bought and you go get a nulled version. Now, when you do install it on your machine, on your server, you do find that over a very short period, your server has been hacked, so to speak. This is because the attacker left a backdoor. Now, anytime your website is connected, which is basically when you host it, the attacker has access to the server. So they can do whatever their intent is, if it was to delete your website, if it was to just use it as storage, or modify content, or include malicious links. And this has been the case for very many people. I hope this has been an informative session, and we will look at keyloggers and information stealers in the next video. Thank you.